5 men, 5 white hoods, 1 leather whip. The sound echoed through 125th Street like a gunshot. Crack. Sergeant James Mitchell, 32 years old, Bronze Star recipient, veteran of the Pacific Theater, fell to his knees on the sidewalk. Blood soaked through the back of his shirt. It was 3:47 p.m., Saturday, June 14th, 1952. Broad daylight. The sidewalk was crowded with shoppers, families, children coming home from the park, and 5 members of the Ku Klux Klan stood in the middle of Harlem in their white robes, holding a whip that had just opened the back of a decorated war hero. The crowd froze. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Because this wasn't the South. This was New York. This was Harlem. And the Klan wasn't supposed to be here. But they were. The man holding the whip, tall, mid-30s, his face hidden behind the hood, raised it again. "You fought for this country," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "But you're still just a—" He didn't finish the sentence. A hand caught his wrist mid-swing. The hooded man spun around. Bumpy Johnson stood behind him, 51 years old, wearing a gray suit and fedora. No weapon visible, no backup in sight. Just standing there, calm, hand gripping the Klansman's wrist like a vice. "Drop it," Bumpy said quietly. The hooded man tried to pull away. Bumpy's grip didn't loosen. "I said, drop it." The whip fell to the pavement with a soft thud. The other 4 Klansmen turned toward Bumpy, hands moving toward their robes where weapons were hidden. "Don't," Bumpy said. Not louder, just final. Behind him, the crowd was beginning to stir. 40, 50, maybe 60 people, all of them watching, all of them waiting to see what Bumpy would do. The Klansmen could feel it, the shift in the air, the realization that they weren't in control anymore. "Get him up," Bumpy said, gesturing to Sergeant Mitchell still on his knees. 2 men from the crowd stepped forward, helped Mitchell to his feet. His back was bleeding, but he could stand. Bumpy looked at the 5 hooded figures. "You made a mistake coming here," he said quietly, "but you're going to fix it." The lead Klansman's voice came out muffled through the hood. "We don't answer to you. You will, starting now." To understand what happened over the next 6 hours, to understand why 5 Ku Klux Klan members spent an entire evening on their knees apologizing to veterans throughout Harlem, you need to understand who Sergeant James Mitchell was. James Mitchell had enlisted in the Army in 1942, 22 years old, fresh out of high school, wanting to serve. Instead, he came home to Jim Crow, to separate water fountains, to restaurants that wouldn't serve him, to a country that had used him but didn't value him. But James Mitchell didn't become bitter. He became active. He joined the NAACP, organized voter registration drives, spoke at schools about the importance of service and citizenship. And on June 14th, 1952, he was walking home from the post office, wearing his Army uniform because he'd just come from a veterans event at the VFW Hall. That's when the 5 Klansmen saw him. They'd come to Harlem that day specifically to send a message, to show that even in the North, even in New York, the Klan still had power. They saw a black man in a military uniform walking with pride, and they decided to destroy that pride. In front of witnesses, in broad daylight. They grabbed him, threw him to the ground, and whipped him. 1 strike across the back. That's all they managed before Bumpy Johnson arrived. 3:52 p.m. The 5 Klansmen stood in the middle of 125th Street, surrounded by a growing crowd. Bumpy had positioned himself between the Klan and Sergeant Mitchell, who was being helped to a nearby bench by 2 veterans who'd been shopping and had come running at the sound of the whip. "Here's what's going to happen," Bumpy said to the hooded figures. His voice was quiet, but in the silence of that street, everyone could hear every word. "You're going to take off those hoods. We don't take them off, or I'll have 50 people rip them off. Your choice." The crowd had grown, 70 people now, maybe 80, and they weren't just watching anymore. They were moving closer, forming a circle around the Klansmen. Slowly, the 5 men removed their hoods. 5 white faces, ranging in age from mid-20s to early 40s. 2 of them looked terrified. 2 looked defiant. 1 looked like he was calculating how to fight his way out. Bumpy studied their faces. "What are your names?" The lead Klansman, the one who'd held the whip, lifted his chin. "I don't have to tell you." Someone in the crowd threw something, a stone. It hit the Klansman in the shoulder. "Next one hits your head," a voice called out. Bumpy raised his hand. The crowd went quiet. "Names," Bumpy repeated. "So here's what you're going to do," Bumpy continued. "You're going to apologize, not to me, to him, and to every veteran in Harlem." Robert Hendricks laughed, nervous, disbelieving. "Every veteran? That's 40 homes," Bumpy said. 40 veterans. You're going to knock on each door, you're going to get on your knees, and you're going to apologize for what you did today. We're not, or, Bumpy interrupted, his voice dropping even lower, or I let this crowd handle you right now, right here, and we see how long you last. The crowd pressed closer. The 5 Klansmen looked around, saw the faces, saw the anger, saw that there was no way out except through Bumpy's terms. "We'll do it," one of the younger ones said quickly, Daniel Walsh. His voice was shaking. Robert Hendricks glared at him. "We'll do it," Daniel repeated louder. "We'll apologize." Bumpy nodded. "Good. We start now." 4:17 p.m. The procession moved through Harlem like a funeral march. Bumpy led. Behind him, the 5 former Klansmen walked in a line, heads down, surrounded by a crowd that had grown to over 100 people. Behind them, Sergeant Mitchell walked with the help of 2 fellow veterans. He'd refused medical attention until "this is finished." The first house was on 126th Street. Private First Class Samuel Brooks, served in Europe, wounded at the Battle of the Bulge. Bumpy knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered, Samuel's mother. "Mrs. Brooks," Bumpy said quietly, "is Samuel home?" "He's resting. His leg's been bothering him today." "Why?" She saw the 5 white men standing behind Bumpy, saw the crowd filling the street. Her expression hardened. "What's this about?" "These men hurt Sergeant Mitchell today. They're here to apologize to Samuel for disrespecting veterans." Samuel Brooks appeared in the doorway behind his mother. 48 years old, leaning on a cane, his left leg damaged from shrapnel that had never fully healed. He looked at the 5 men, then at Bumpy, then at Sergeant Mitchell standing at the back of the crowd, shirt stained with blood. "What did they do?" Samuel asked quietly. "Whipped him in the street," Bumpy said, "in his uniform." Samuel's face went hard as stone. Bumpy gestured to the 5 men. "On your knees." Robert Hendricks hesitated. The crowd behind him pushed forward slightly. He knelt. The other 4 followed. 5 men on their knees on a Harlem sidewalk. "Apologize," Bumpy said. Robert Hendricks's voice came out as a mumble. "We're sorry." "Louder," Samuel Brooks said from his doorway, "and look at me when you say it." Robert looked up, met Samuel's eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, louder this time. "We were wrong to hurt Sergeant Mitchell. We were wrong to disrespect veterans." The other 4 repeated it, some more convincingly than others. Samuel Brooks stared at them for a... The pattern repeated. House after house, veteran after veteran. Some reactions were quiet, a nod of acknowledgement, a door closed without a word. Others were loud, shouting, cursing, threats. At the 8th house, Corporal William Hayes threw a bucket of water on the kneeling men. That's for every brother who died fighting while you sat home in your hoods. At the 15th house, Staff Sergeant Marcus Johnson, no relation to Bumpy, made them stay on their knees for 10 full minutes in silence before he'd even open the door. At the 23rd house, Private Leon Thompson's wife came out with their 3 children, made the Klansmen apologize to the children specifically. Tell them why you hurt Sergeant Mitchell. Tell them what you think of their father who fought for this country. By the 30th house, all 5 Klansmen were crying. Their knees were bleeding through their pants from kneeling on concrete and gravel. Their voices were hoarse from repeating the same words over and over. Their shame was visible, complete, total. The crowd followed the entire time, sometimes 50 people, sometimes 100, growing and shrinking as people joined and left, but always present, always watching, always making sure the Klansmen understood. Harlem remembers. 8:43 p.m. The 40th house. Master Sergeant Andrew Price, 61 years old, veteran of World War I, had fought in France in 1918, had come home to a country that still treated him like a second-class citizen. He sat on his porch in a rocking chair, waiting. The procession arrived, smaller now, maybe 30 people still following. The rest had gone home for dinner, satisfied that justice was being served. Bumpy walked up to the porch. Sergeant Price. Andrew Price nodded. Bumpy, heard you were making rounds today. Last house, Bumpy said. Andrew looked at the 5 men standing behind Bumpy. They were destroyed, physically exhausted, emotionally shattered, barely able to stand. On your knees, Bumpy said one last time. The 5 men knelt, slower now, their legs barely working. Robert Hendricks opened his mouth to speak, but Andrew Price raised his hand. I don't want your apology, he said quietly. The Klansmen looked up, confused. I fought in the Great War, Andrew continued. Came home in 1919. You know what happened that summer? Red Summer. Worst wave of racial violence this country ever saw. Lynchings, massacres, race riots in 26 cities. He leaned forward in his rocking chair. And you know what I learned? The street was silent. I learned that apologies don't mean anything. What happened today? You whipping Sergeant Mitchell, Bumpy making you crawl through Harlem on your knees. That doesn't make you stop hating us. That just makes you hate us more quietly. He turned to Bumpy. You did good work today, Bumpy. You showed these men that Harlem fights back, that we protect our own, that there are consequences. Andrew looked back at the kneeling Klansmen. But I'm not going to pretend your forced apologies mean anything. I'm not going to pretend you've learned anything except fear. He stepped back. So here's what I'll say. Don't come back to Harlem. Don't put on your hoods again. Don't hurt another veteran. Not because you respect us, because you're afraid of what happens if you do. Andrew Price turned and walked back up his porch steps. At the door, he paused. And if you do come back, next time, Bumpy won't be this gentle. He went inside. The door closed. Bumpy looked at the 5 kneeling men. Stand up. They stood, barely. You're done. Get out of Harlem and don't ever come back. Robert Hendricks found his voice. Our cars are... Walk, Bumpy said. Walk all the way back to wherever you came from and think about what you did with every step. The 5 men started walking, limping, supporting each other. The crowd let them pass, watched them disappear into the darkness beyond 125th Street. Nobody followed. Nobody needed to. The message had been delivered. Sergeant James Mitchell was treated at Harlem Hospital that night. 12 stitches across his back. The wound would heal, but the scar would be permanent.
When a reporter from the Amsterdam News came to interview him the next day, Mitchell was sitting up in his hospital bed. "Sergeant Mitchell, how do you feel about what Bumpy Johnson did yesterday?" Mitchell was quiet for a moment. "I feel like I got to see something most veterans never see. I got to see justice, real justice, not legal justice, not the kind that comes from courtrooms and judges, the kind that comes from your community standing up and saying, 'Not here, not today.'" "Do you think the Klansmen learned anything?" Mitchell shook his head. "No, Sergeant Price was right. They didn't learn to respect us. They just learned to fear what happens if they disrespect us. And maybe that's enough." "What do you think will happen to them?"
Within a week, every white supremacist organization on the East Coast had heard about it. 5 Klansmen went to Harlem, attacked a veteran, got forced to apologize on their knees to 40 families. The details got exaggerated over time. Some versions said 100 houses, some said Bumpy broke the Klansman's knees himself, but the core truth remained. Don't go to Harlem. Don't attack veterans. Bumpy Johnson protects his own. For the next 15 years, until Bumpy died in 1968, not a single Klan member operated openly in Harlem. Not one cross was burned. Not one hood was worn in public. Not one veteran was touched. The 5 Klansmen never returned to New York. Robert Hendricks moved to Pennsylvania. William Cooper went to Ohio. The others scattered. None of them ever spoke publicly about what happened that day. But Sergeant Andrew Price was right. They didn't learn respect. They learned fear. And in Harlem, that was enough.